I stepped back into the restaurant because I had left my phone behind. That small, seemingly harmless oversight ended up saving my life. Dinner had completely worn me down. My head felt unsteady, my body empty, and even after I went outside to breathe, the pavement still felt like it was moving beneath me. Convinced myself it was just fatigue. 64 years of labor, pressure, and duty eventually weigh on anyone. That was what my son always reminded me. My name is Ella Laner Whitmore. For over 30 years I built a luxury fragrance company with my own hands. I trained my sense of smell the way an athlete trains their body, focus, accuracy, patience. Trusted my judgment, my skill, and my family, especially my son. That evening was meant to be a celebration, a calm family dinner. Nothing intense, nothing memorable. But the moment I reopened the door and walked back into the restaurant, I knew something was off. The sounds had vanished. No clinking cutlery, no gentle music, no low murmur of voices. The dining area was almost empty. The lights were dim, chairs piled against the walls. They were closing. Had taken no more than 3 steps when a young waitress hurried toward me. Her skin was pale, nearly colorless. Her hands trembled as she reached out and caught my sleeve before I could speak. "Please," she whispered. "You have to come with me now." I tried to pull away. I told her I had only come back for my phone. I said I was exhausted and wanted to leave. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and locked the front door. The sharp click of the bolt echoed far too loudly in the quiet room. My heart started racing. She leaned in, lowering her voice until it was barely a breath. "I know this sounds strange," she said, "but I need to show you something from the security camera above your table." Then she met my eyes. The fear and urgency in her expression blended into words that nearly gave out my legs. "You have to promise me you won't faint." In that instant I knew this was no longer about a forgotten phone. It was about something that happened while I sat at that table. Something my own son did when he believed I was gone. Before that night I was certain I knew who I was. I was not a weak woman losing touch with reality. I was not confused. I was not disappearing. I was Ella Laner Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Alier, a fragrance house built from nothing but discipline and relentless belief. I did not inherit money. I did not marry into influence. I began in a rented room with cracked windows, secondhand glassware, and handwritten formulas filling stained notebooks. While others slept, I distilled. While others celebrated holidays, I tested batch after batch. That failed repeatedly. My sense of smell was not a pastime. It was my survival. Paid my employees, fed my child, kept me alive. To me, scent was memory. Jasmine meant warm summer nights. Vetiver was damp earth after rain. Cedar meant safety. I could smell fear in a room. I could detect deceit on person before they spoke. And for years that ability never betrayed me. I raised my son alone after his father died. Jason grew up in my lab playing under work tables, learning the difference between orange blossom and narrowly before he could even write his name properly. I believed simply being around the work would teach him respect for it. I was mistaken. As he grew older, Jason lost interest in creation. He preferred meetings, titles, applause. He loved the appearance of success far more than the effort behind it. Still, I trusted him. He was my son. Blood had mattered to me once. When the symptoms began, I turned the blame inward. It started with exhaustion, followed by congestion, then brief spells of lightheadedness. I brushed them aside. Stress can do unsettling things to the body. That's what everyone said. Jason said it too. When I couldn't identify a familiar mixture in the lab, panic edged in. When coffee had no scent, embarrassment followed. When my own perfume felt hollow against my wrist, fear finally took hold. I started to wonder if my time had run out. That was when Jason intervened more decisively. His worry grew more intense. His advice more frequent. He spoke in a gentle, patient tone. The kind people use when they think someone is already fading. And little by little, dangerously, I began to trust him. I did not realize then that what felt like deterioration was not nature at work. It was intention. From the outside, Jason appeared to be the ideal son. He called every morning. He monitored my schedule. He reminded me to eat, to rest, to cancel late nights in the lab. His voice was always calm, always controlled, always sensible. Anyone watching would have thought I was fortunate. Even I believed it. Melissa, his wife, performed her part just as convincingly. She never raised her voice, never hurried me. She chose each word carefully, cushioning every suggestion and concern. She would lightly touch my arm as she spoke, as if anchoring me. They never said, "You are weak." They said, "You deserve peace." They never said, "You are failing." They said, "You have already done enough." At dinner, Jason would lean closer and lower his voice, as if sharing something meant only for us. "Mom, you don't need to prove anything anymore. You built something extraordinary. Let us help you protect it." Protect it. That word stayed with me. Melissa would follow, nodding slowly. "Stress accelerates aging. Eleanor, you have nothing left to fight. Why carry everything alone when family is here?" Family. They discuss power of attorney the way one talks about insurance or medication. Something sensible, something prudent, a precaution. "You can cancel at any time," Jason said. "It's only in case something happens. Nothing changes without your approval." They spoke of ocean air, quiet mornings, long walks, a smaller house, fewer choices. They presented it as kindness, not erasure. I felt myself getting smaller. Not because they pushed, but because they waited. They let uncertainty do the work. They allowed my fear to grow in the gaps between their words. When I hesitated, they didn't argue. They smiled. They told me to think it over. And I did. Alone at night, I replayed every mistake I had ever made. Every failed batch. Every recent moment when my nose had betrayed me. I wondered if my success carried an expiration date. That was the cruelest part. They never had to lie outright. They only had to steer me toward the ending they wanted. By the time I agreed to sign the papers, I felt relief. Relief from fighting. Relief from questioning myself. Relief from holding on. I didn't yet understand that relief was exactly what they were relying on. Because while I believed my body was failing me, someone very close to me was making sure it did, and smiling as he did. The waitress guided me down a narrow hallway behind the dining room. My legs felt unsteady, but my mind was oddly clear. Fear has a way of sharpening certain senses even as others dull. She stopped at a small storage room and opened the door just wide enough for us to slip inside. Boxes of napkins were stacked along the walls. Cleaning supplies lined the floor. In the corner, a small monitor glowed faintly. She closed the door and locked it. I remember thinking how ridiculous it was. A woman who owned a company worth millions standing in a storage room, heart pounding because a stranger had asked her not to faint. My phone rested on the table beneath the monitor, but she didn't hand it to me. Instead, she turned the screen toward me. "This was from 20 minutes ago," she said softly. "From the camera above your table." The footage was fuzzy, washed in black and white. On the screen, I watched myself stand, slide my chair back a little, and politely excuse myself. I saw myself leave the shot. Jason and Melissa stayed behind. The instant I was gone, Jason transformed. His soft posture disappeared. The worried tilt of his head was gone. He leaned back, scanned the room, then slipped his hand into the inner pocket of his jacket. My breath stalled. He pulled out a small transparent vial. Not a prescription container. Not anything issued by a doctor. A lab-grade ampoule. I watched him open it with effortless familiarity. Melissa edged closer, positioning herself to block the view of passing servers. She laughed at something he said. They appeared calm, at ease. Jason tipped my wine glass. The clear liquid drained into the red wine. I clutched the edge of the table beside me to stop myself from falling. My own son had poisoned my drink. But the video did not end there. Jason leaned in, shoulders curling forward. He began to tremble slightly, overdoing it, copying my shaky hands, my dizziness. His face warped into a grotesque imitation of frailty. Melissa threw her head back and laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not an anxious one. Mockery. Pure delight. Something shattered inside me. Turn the sound on, I said. My voice felt foreign. The waitress paused, then pressed the control. The low murmur of the restaurant filled the room. She thinks it is just old age, Jason said in the recording, his tone relaxed, amused. The poor woman. A few more doses and she will forget what anything even smells like. Melissa leaned closer. What if she hesitates again? Jason smiled. She will not. Where would she go? She is terrified of losing her gift. And the best part is she does not even realize she is losing the company as well. They laughed together. At that moment my knees buckled. I dropped to the floor not from weakness, but because the truth weighed more than my body could support. The woman who raised him no longer existed. In her place was someone he viewed as an obstacle, one he was eliminating one dose at a time. I cannot remember how long I stayed on that storage room floor. Time dissolved. There was only the sound of my breathing and the crushing weight of what I had learned. Betrayal does not announce itself. It settles in the chest like a stone and slowly steals the breath. The waitress knelt beside me, unsure if she should touch me. She asked if I needed water or an ambulance. Her voice shook, but her eyes held resolve. I shook my head because beneath the grief, something else was emerging. Clarity. My body was not betraying me. My mind was not failing. I was being poisoned deliberately, carefully. The dizziness, the congestion, the loss of smell. Everything fit perfectly now. The timing, the pressure, the sudden push to sign everything away. This was not nature. This was design. That realization changed everything. The grief still hurt, but it no longer ruled me. Anger did not consume me either. What replaced it was far more dangerous. Focus. I rose slowly. My legs felt solid again. My hands were steady. I thanked the waitress. I gave her cash, not as a tip, but as appreciation. I asked her to stay quiet, to tell anyone who asked that I had simply gone back for my phone. She agreed instantly. When I stepped outside, the night air felt different. I still could not smell it, but now I understood why, and that meant it could be undone. I did not return home as a broken woman. I returned as a planner. I went straight to my private laboratory, the one place Jason never entered. I tested residue from my wine, from the fabric of my scarf. The results were undeniable. A synthetic receptor inhibitor, temporary yet potent. Whoever selected it believed I would quit before I understood what was happening. They were mistaken. I studied the charts, the data, the evidence shining on the screen. And for the first time since my symptoms started, I smiled. They wanted a frail old woman who would surrender without resistance. I decided to give them precisely that performance. And while they clapped for it, I would reclaim everything. The next morning I called Jason. I let my voice tremble. I breathed unevenly. I let fear seep into every pause. Jason, I said, I think it's getting worse. I can't smell anything anymore. Not coffee, not soap, nothing. There was a short silence on the line. Not worry, calculation. Then his voice softened, exactly as I expected. Mom, it's okay. We knew this could happen. You've been pushing yourself far too hard for too long. I swallowed, forcing a quiet sob. I can't live like this. I don't want to wait until next week. Bring the papers today. I'll sign everything. I just want it to end. Relief slipped into his voice before he could stop it. Of course, Mom. Melissa and I will come by after lunch. Get some rest. We'll handle everything. When the call ended, my hands were steady. Speed was my first move. I took away his time to think. People make careless errors when they believe they've already won. I ate nothing from the house that day. Instead, I discarded every open container, every supplement Jason had ever given me. In the back of a cabinet, I found them, small clear vials identical to the one I'd seen on the screen. Same substance. Same label. I documented everything. Then I contacted the one man I trusted completely. Henry Cole. He had supplied rare raw materials to my company for decades. He knew my inventory better than anyone alive. That night, under the cover of darkness, his trucks arrived. Every barrel of aged oil, every sealed essence, every irreplaceable formula was quietly transferred to a secure location known only to us. What remained in the warehouse was harmless liquid, carefully tinted and sealed, indistinguishable to anyone who didn't truly understand scent. By the time Jason and Melissa arrived at my house that afternoon, I was wrapped in a shawl, slightly hunched in my chair, playing the role they expected. I dropped a pen. I mixed up words. I apologized too often. They exchanged satisfied looks. They believed they were witnessing my end. In truth, they were standing on a stage, and the final act had already been written. The board meeting was held Friday morning. Jason insisted on driving me himself. He kept glancing at me from the corner of his eye, searching for signs of confusion, weakness, collapse. I gave him exactly what he wanted. Slow movements. A distant stare. Silence. The conference room was already full when we arrived. A long polished table, leather chairs, men in gray suits carrying the scent of money and impatience. Representatives from Blackage Industrial Group sat on one side, their expressions cool and detached. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a signature. Jason hurried ahead of me, eager to control the room. He pulled out the documents, placed them neatly in front of my chair, and set a pen in my hand. "Just sign here, Mom," he whispered. "Then we can all relax." I looked down at the papers but didn't move. "Before I sign," I said slowly, "there is something I must do." Jason stiffened. The executives exchanged irritated glances. "This will only take a moment," I continued. "It's a tradition in my company, one my father followed, and his father before him." I reached down and placed a small case on the table. Inside were scent blotters and 2 identical crystal decanters filled with amber-colored liquid. "We call it the Founder's Test," I said. "Before any transfer of ownership, the successor must identify the core notes of the house." Jason's face drained of color. "This is absurd," he muttered. "Mom, stop this." One of the executives laughed, reeking of cologne. "This is what we're delaying millions for? You're purchasing a fragrance house," I replied calmly. "If you can't identify scent, you're buying blind." Reluctantly, they agreed. I handed a blotter dipped in the liquid to Jason first. He hesitated, then breathed it in. No response. Not even the slightest hint of recognition. I passed another sample to the senior executive. He inhaled with assurance. Then his expression tightened. "Floral," he said. "A little sweet." Jason nodded immediately. "Yes. Rose, perhaps sandalwood." I allowed the silence to linger. "Fascinating," I murmured. I sat up straighter. The weakness drained from my posture, and my tone grew sharp. "Gentlemen, what you've just identified is an industrial solvent blended with a synthetic receptor inhibitor and a low-grade air freshener. Not perfume. Not oil. Not art." The room went still. Jason jumped to his feet. "She's mistaken. She's been unwell. Don't listen to her." I pressed the button on the remote in my hand. Jason's own voice echoed through the room. "She thinks it's just old age. A few more doses and she won't remember what anything smells like." Melissa's laughter followed. The executives turned pale. "This meeting is adjourned," one of them said, rising abruptly. "No," I answered. "This is where it begins. The oils you intended to acquire tonight are gone, legally removed and permanently secured. What's left in the warehouses is nothing more than colored water. You came here to purchase my legacy. Instead, you uncovered a crime." Jason stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. In that instant, the trap snapped shut, and there was no escape. Chaos erupted, but it was no longer mine to manage. The Blackage executives stood all at once, talking over one another, denying involvement, backing away from Jason as though he were suddenly infectious. The men who had entered so self-assured now refused to meet my gaze. Jason turned toward me, terror flooding his face. "Mom, please," he said. "This has gone too far. You don't understand what you're doing." I understood completely. Before another word could be spoken, the doors opened. Police officers stepped into the conference room, followed by a detective holding a file already thick with evidence. It had been submitted the night before, the recordings, the lab analyses, the vials found in Jason's possession. Jason was arrested on the spot. He no longer looked like a mastermind. He looked small, trapped, raging in the way only someone exposed by their own cruelty can be. Melissa never spoke to me again. She left the building without a word and filed for divorce within weeks. Blackage Industrial Group withdrew overnight. Their stock plummeted as investigations began. They called it a misunderstanding. The courts called it complicity. I did not attend my son's sentencing. Some doors once shut do not need to be opened again. Justice did not bring peace, but it brought truth, and that was enough to breathe again. I returned to the lab the following Monday. The silence there felt different. No longer heavy or suffocating. It was clean. Honest. I ran my fingers across the glassware, over aging notebooks filled with handwriting only I could still recognize. That was where Lily found me. She no longer wore a server's uniform. She hovered uncertainly in the doorway, unsure if she belonged. In her eyes I saw something familiar, something I once carried myself. Curiosity. Integrity. I offered her an apprenticeship not out of gratitude but because she had done something rare. She chose truth when silence was easier. She trusted her instincts when fear urged her not to. Legacy, I realized, isn't about blood. It's about values. It's about who you trust to carry what matters when you no longer can. Together we rebuilt slowly, carefully, with respect for what had been preserved. For the first time in years, I created without pressure, without manipulation, without fear. People often ask if I regret what I did. If I regret exposing my own son. If a mother's love should outweigh justice. Here is the truth. Love without limits becomes permission. Forgiveness without accountability becomes betrayal of the self. What Jason did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, repeated, deliberate, and taken with intent. I didn't destroy his life. He did. What I protected was my name, my work, and my right to finish my life with clarity. So now I ask you, if you were in my position, what would you have done? Would you have shielded your child at the cost of your soul? Or would you have chosen truth, even if it shattered your heart? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about survival.